Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Today we're going to take a closer look at Tesla. The stock is up nearly 15% as I am recording, sitting at $193. So there's a lot of great news happening with FSD in China. And in my opinion, what's happening in China right now can definitely be beneficial in the long term for Tesla here in the United States. So today's episode, I want to take a closer look at what's happening with the overall stock right now. But more importantly, I want to take a closer look at a lot of great updates that we got from about FSD during the earnings call. So let's take a closer look in today's episode.
I want to thank the Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
All right, so Tesla stock, as you guys know, I am bullish in this company, obviously a big AI company in my opinion, but in the past few months, I've definitely been ridiculed for kind of saying that this has been an AI play. Well, Tesla today did announce two big news, and it really deals with FSD in general. So in China, we did see that Tesla on Sunday said local Chinese authorities removed restrictions on its car after passing the country's data security requirements. So, for those that are not familiar, obviously China's a huge market for Tesla. Since 2021, Tesla has been required to store all data collected by its Chinese fleet in Shanghai, leaving the company unable to transfer any back to the United States. So obviously, making sure some of that is going correctly, there has to be some form of testing, some form of security system. And now they got approved that, hey, look, Tesla is doing everything right, so they can continue to the next step of FSD. What we also saw with Tesla is there are reports that Tesla and Baidu have come up on an agreement for mapping deal for FSD in China. So if you kind of put both these together, it definitely helps the acceleration rate of FSD in China. And this is very important because the Chinese market is obviously a huge market for the EV space. Unfortunately, the EV space is definitely one that has a lot of competition. So at the end of the day, it's going to have to be like who gives you the better price, but also the better value. And if you have competitors at either similar pricing as Tesla, maybe a little bit cheaper, but Tesla is able to offer something like FSD, the chances of you gaining market share increase, right? So the probability of Tesla being more successful because they have more to offer to their to consumers in China increases the ability of them gaining market share. So that's the first thing, right? And obviously, even though the data can't be transferred back to China, back to the United States, obviously improvements in FSD can be huge improvements globally. Before we go any further, we are now on the road to 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Thank you all for the crazy support. So if you haven't and are enjoying the content, make sure to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. Finally, if you want to support the channel a little bit more, make sure to check out my special offer at fool.com/Jose. Now back to today's episode. Now, I do have a presentation here of kind of some of the stuff Elon mentioned in the past few days and some of the quotes from the earnings transcript. So Elon on April 28th, yesterday, mentioned that Tesla will spend around $10 billion this year in combined training and inferencing AI. And this is pretty insane, right? Because I can't really think of many companies outside of cloud server providers, but cloud server providers need to build infrastructure for their own solutions, spending this type of money for AI. So this is definitely Elon kind of creating this huge gap between any competitor that might be if they're not investing this type of money. So this makes me very, very bullish, obviously, for Tesla and really pushing in the AI space. I personally, again, coming from my electrical engineering, working in some pretty cool projects when I used to be an engineer, definitely seeing some of these things like AI coming up to market, it gets me excited when I see Tesla continue to make this push because this is definitely the future. So now I want to take a closer look at some of the things that we saw during the transcript. So regarding FSD, this is something Elon mentioned that regarding FSD version 12, this is pure AI-based self-driving. And if you haven't experienced it, he strongly urges you to try it out. And this is to really showcase that, look, Tesla is an AI company, not a car company. And like I mentioned, I did believe Tesla was an AI company, but that real big bullish point was when I saw FSD version 12, because to my opinion, that is that inflection point. FSD, I don't know if it's been said, but FSD version 12 is the moment of ChatGPT 3 for vehicles, in my opinion. It's that inflection point for AI, for the autonomous driving market. So that's what really got me very, very bullish. Now, obviously, regulatory approvals is still a huge, huge hurdle for here in the United States. And that was a question during the Q&A session in the earnings call. And a lot of the top management had a lot to share. First, they mentioned that, hey, look, there's a lot of states out right now that are adopting autonomous vehicles laws. And while they might be focusing on more like maybe LiDAR, supersonic, and all these other types of technology, that is definitely paving a way for operations for Tesla. Excuse me. So obviously, they expect that these states continue to work well with data. And as Tesla gets more data, you can kind of get more regulatory approval based on on tech like Tesla provides. And Elon mentions it. He's like, look, it's been pretty helpful that autonomous car companies have been cutting a path through the regulatory jungle. And this is very true, right? I feel like now that a lot of other players are focusing here on autonomous driving, it's definitely helping Tesla also move in that direction. I think if you got a scale, a statistically significant amount of data that shows conclusively that autonomous cars are pretty much safer than human driving, then they'll be very hard for governments to ignore this, because at the end of the day, if you're ignoring FSD that could save lives, you're pretty much killing people at the same time. So this is why I believe FSD, if it gets approved in China, becomes a very big important point for the United States, because Tesla can kind of collect all this data that they've said and say, hey, look, statistically, we've been driving in China with all these people, with all these miles driven, and statistically, we've done a lot better and it's a lot safer to humans. So while, and at the end of the day, right, I feel like it should be sad if the United States starts to lag in technology because of regulatory pressures like this. So if the data is strong, and I do believe things like this China may be approving in the future could help boost that data, it can definitely be beneficial for the regulatory hurdles here in the United States. Now, another thing that I found pretty interesting, and maybe this might just be the kind of engineer and technologist thinking in me, they do mention that the inference conditions in their hardware it's not hard. It's not hard coded, right? Everything is neural network. It's pretty soft, so it's all probabilistic. So it will adopt kind of this distribution and based on the new data that it's getting. So for me, this again continues to showcase that with FSD, the more miles that are driving, the more data being collected, the better that probabilistic data distribution is going to get, and FSD is going to get better at making all different types of decisions. So pretty good here. There was another great question coming out from the earnings call that talked about licensing future of FSD. Elon mentions that there is one major automaker regarding licensing FSD, which I think is pretty important. And there's another question kind of continuing here with this licensing of FSD. They're kind of saying, hey, look, what has to change where more OEMs and more car companies come up to Tesla and say, hey, look, we want to try FSD, we want to license it. And Elon mentions that the biggest thing is just to showcase that their approach is the right approach, right? That, hey, look, if you want to add some form of FSD into your vehicle, you don't need to have expensive LiDARs, expensive radars, expensive ultrasonic. I think earlier I said supersonic, my apologies. Expensive ultrasonics, right? All you need is some low cost inference computing and some standard cameras. So he believes that right now 12.3 is going to show that, right? It's going to show that this is the obvious approach. And not with 12.3, and now with the future of China regulations maybe improving FSD adaptability there in China, that can be another point. So again, this big move in China, if it goes in the right direction, it can help push other OEM car makers to kind of license FSD licensing deals in the future. Now, they do mention that, hey, look, most car companies have a very long life cycle on their vehicles, right? Most cars have a 4-year life cycle per vehicle. So even if they sign a deal right now, the car probably won't come out for 3 to 4 years from now. So something to keep in mind now, obviously, you might be like, hey, look, if they get FSD, we're going to see a huge boost in revenue right off the bat. Not necessarily true because of the life cycle of these vehicles. And here we're going to finish off that Elon mentions he wouldn't be surprised if they do sign a deal this year, maybe even more than one this year. Obviously, Elon sometimes a little bit more bullish on himself, but I think maybe within the next 2 years, if we continue to see upgrades like FSD 12.3, if that continues to evolve, if the adoption rate of FSD in general continues to evolve as well, and if more countries start to become more familiar with this technology, I do believe the chance of a deal would come out within the next year or two. So overall, a lot of bullish news in my opinion for Tesla. This is going to continue to be a top holding for me. Obviously, no NVIDIA, but definitely a big player in my overall position. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Take care, have a good day, and see you next time.